Good afternoon. It is Saturday, March the 7th, 2 p.m. Actually 2:01, but who's counting? I'm Leon Davis, and this is Altitude Adjustment. Now, most of the time, when people talk about off the grid, they think of living in a remote area where there's no phone or a lot of the conveniences of living in an urban or suburban area. But that's not the kind of off the grid I'm talking about today. I'm talking about electronic off the grid. The life that we lead is more and more connected, and information is captured more and more about the things that we do on a daily basis. And that's what I'm going to cover today.
Welcome to Altitude Adjustment.
So, thank you very much for joining me today. So some of the important facts of things that we deal with on a daily basis in our life is more of the things that we need, even our medical records and things like that are being captured. That information is being saved. Part of it is about making life easier for us. And then there's another aspect of it. So my concern is that is it necessary to capture all of that information? So let's talk first about the internet and what we do and our surfing and things like that. So when we think of surfing the internet, we go out, we want entertainment, or we want information, but other people have designs on our behavior, and they're capturing a lot of information. And so I did some research, and Google, just Google alone, is tracking some 82% of internet traffic. I found that really interesting. And then 79% of websites track users' behavior. Now, some of the methods used for tracking is cookies. A lot of people have heard about that, and that's where information, when you surf to a site, information is kept in a text file and it's saved to your hard drive or to your phone, or however you're accessing the internet, and that information is saved and it's used across websites. So you could go to Google and then surf to Bed Bath and Beyond, and Bed Bath and Beyond may have access to what you did on the Google site. That part of that is done by cookies. There's what's called let me get to it here. Tracking beacons. Now, a tracking beacon, and this one I wasn't completely familiar with, but it is where they put a small file. Now, if you know anything about how information is placed on your screen, the smallest unit of measurement is called a pixel. So if your screen is 1280 by 720, that means there's 1280 pixels wide across. So the width is always first and the height is always second. So it's 1280 pixels across and 720 pixels down. So a pixel is the tiniest measurement for resolutions, dealing with screens and stuff. And a beacon is a pixel-sized image, 1 pixel by 1 pixel. Actually, almost too small for you to see, but it is placed on your system or in your web browser, so that they have access to where you've been, what you've done, and where you've been and what you've done. Um, there we go. All right. So there's cookies, there's beacons, and then there's browser fingerprinting. And this was something that I just recently was alerted to. So Mozilla, which is the maker of the Firefox browser, a message popped up and it said that they had thwarted an effort to fingerprint for browser fingerprinting. This is where you surf to a website. The website then captures information such as your the type of browser that you're using, what version it is, your screen resolution, if it's 1280 by 720 or 1024 by 768 or whatever it may be. It captures that information. It captures what plugins you're using. It captures, a lot of data that can actually identify you individually. So what the information that I ran across is that everyone's system is almost so unique, the setup and how you compute, that with this information, with this data capture, they can actually identify who you are individually. And that has, so for me, that sends up a flag. Now, I appreciate that they want to make things easier for me. So I don't always have to log into a site every time I come back. I don't have to change the configuration of a web page if they have a web page that that I can set up, and I can have different news feeds or different information displayed on that web page, that I don't have to come back and reset that up every time. And so I appreciate that. But while I appreciate that, the offside of that is that potentially they have information to identify me individually. And it's not that I may be doing something nefarious, or that I may doing something that needs attention. It's just the mere fact that, why do I have to be surveilled at that level? Especially when I'm not doing anything nefarious. So my concern is, and some people, don't see this as a necessary problem at this point, that they're going to be surveilled anyway. So why get up in arms about it? And my concern is not so much that I'm being surveilled, it's that the potential misuse of that, the potential misuse of the data, is more concerning to me. Such as we have more and more large corporations consolidating everything. So where you have 5 or 6 large tech companies that are capturing most of the data about you, if there was someone who wanted to cause you difficulty or wanted to harass you in some way, in order to round up information about you, they would not have to go to too many different sources. They would only have to hit 1 or 2 sources, and then they can draw a big picture about you and your life, and about your habits and where you go and what kind of things you buy. And then they can possibly make your life miserable simply from the aspect that they have that information about you. They have access to that information about you. And a couple of the examples, one is, and this wasn't so much a tech example, but Janet Jackson had a wardrobe malfunction at Super Bowl event. An executive at the company, Les Moonves, name him by name, chose to create a problem for her and was able to do it because the company had such reach in the music industry, was able to keep her from getting on radio stations, was able to keep her music from being produced or heard, was able to negatively impact her career because that individual did not like that incident that happened. So it wasn't that it was adjudicated that she did particularly something wrong and that there was a legal process and she was punished by the legal system. It was one individual who chose to identify something that they didn't like and use the power of the large corporation and all of the resources of that corporation to punish someone for what they deemed as unacceptable. And so my concern is not that everybody's going to do that, but to what extent do we allow that kind of surveillance of people's lives and only a few people having access to that data to be able to create the problem for other people? So, you know, if you surf to a website and you weren't aware that the website had child pornography on it, and so you get there, you see the child pornography pops up, and you close the website and you move on. The problem is that you've been tracked there. Whether you frequent that type of site or anything of that nature, you've been tracked there. And someone may come along, see that you have that in your history someplace, and then deem you as a problem. And use the resources that they have to punish you because they've chosen or they believe that you deserve that. That is a behavior that unilaterally decide to punish you. So my concern is obviously putting that much power into the hands of a few. Now, some monitoring is going to happen and should happen. So when you're born, you get a Social Security number. That Social Security number follows you the rest of your life. It follows you for a driver's license, for I think getting up. Passport. Getting a passport. You need to have that to get your benefits. It's there for you to show I have worked. You know, they have a list of your work history, what you've made, what you've paid into the system, and what you should get back. And I think that is so, and I understand that that's my interpretation, that is an acceptable use of capturing data. Now, there is other capturing data. So a lot of data that's captured about you is not captured for a particular reason. So some data is captured because manufacturers and business people want to be able to sell you things. And there is a discussion to be had about how much information should they have about you. So if they know that you're a man 20 years old and you like fishing and you live in the Midwest, what other information do they need in order to set ideas and priorities for their business about where they're going to sell to? Now, I don't think they even need to know that you're in the Midwest. I don't think they need to know you're a man in your 20s. Maybe you're a man under 50 that likes fishing. So they should appeal to fishermen or fisherwomen. crazy, but so appeal to people that love to fish. And I think by targeting smaller and smaller audiences, they don't, by doing that, they don't contribute to the infrastructure necessary to benefit everyone. And what I mean by that is, if you're only going to target the Midwest, if let's say you find that a big population of fisher people that love to fish live in a particular corridor of the country, that doesn't mean all of the people that love to fish are going to live in that corridor. It just means you're more likely to sell fishing equipment in that particular corridor. If you, as a business, only advertise in advertising sources in that particular corridor, I think two things really happen. You ignore the rest of the country where possibly fishing may catch on, and you also don't support the infrastructure necessary to reach all of the people with products and goods and services. So basically, what you're saying, when you only pick one small segment to work with, is that I'm going to only support this segment because only this segment is giving me the immediate income that I need. And I think businesses have a greater responsibility to make sure that the infrastructure necessary to bring advertising, and if you stop and think about it, the number of ways to present advertising has gotten smaller and more concentrated, and with that can become damaging the system as a whole for everyone. So I wanted to get back on some of the concerns that I have with large corporations having such amounts of data about you. And so I mentioned Google was tracking 82% of internet traffic. So Google is one of the worst, I don't say worst, it's one of the largest trackers of information. And one of the things that concerned me significantly was, I think last year or maybe year before last, Google and Yahoo were both sued because they were scanning email and presenting ads to people based on the scans of people's email. Now, Google and Yahoo in their defense says, well, it's computer generated, and there's no one person that's actually going in and looking through people's emails. And for me, that it does not matter whether it's an individual or whether it's computer. An email is a message sent from one individual to another individual, regardless of how many carbon copies you make. It's still one-to-one. And if I wanted Google to know about what was in my emails, I would send Google a copy. So I think that there's a line that Google and Yahoo crossed that said, because I give you free email, I am allowed to take liberties with your information for my benefit. And even if they put that information, let's say, in order for you to sign up, you have to allow me to read your private messages. I think is a problem for somebody to even want to do that, to do that to someone, to violate the opportunity for that person to feel that whatever information they send to person B is just going to be to person B. There we go. And so large companies having this information at so the idea that if you present people with options that they don't need, that they may do something that they wouldn't ordinarily do. If there's no need, so a lot of the data capturing that's going on is they'll capture as much information as they can, learn everything they possibly can, even though a lot of that data is not data that they're going to particularly use for a particular purpose. And the idea is, if I capture everything and something changes down the road, then I'll have the data to use it, and I won't have to go back and try to capture it again. The more information that you have about a person, the more exposed that person is to the whims of the person that has the data. So if someone walked up to you on the street, you didn't know him from Adam, never seen that person before, and they talked about your family, your relatives, and told you about your kids, it would be alarming. It would be alarming that someone took the time or had the opportunity to access information that you held private and you may not necessarily have wanted to share. There are websites out where you can put someone's name in and find out about mortgages and criminal records, and if they've been arrested, and if they have outstanding, if they've been on time with their bills, and so someone can go pay $40 or $50 and get a life history about you. And so that's one of the other things that has bothered me, is that there is a coziness between government and private industry with your data that may be used to compromise you in a way that you would not had they not had access to that data. And most of it is happening without your permission. So I don't want to sound alarmist. I don't want to sound that I'm saying you should be paranoid. Most of it is probably very innocuous and not anything you would even miss, or no one would walk up and tell you about your family or things of that nature. It's just the potential is there. So my concern is that people should understand that, not necessarily act out of fear or act out of defensiveness, but that we should really examine what data should be allowed to be captured and what data should be allowed to be eliminated. In Europe, they have a ability to be forgotten law, which means data after a certain time period is expunged. It's gone and never to be returned. Part of the reason that we seal juvenile records is so that at some point you get a fresh start, and whatever happened in your past was in your past, and it's not going to continue to persist and beat you down in your future. And right now we don't have enough safeguards to ensure that the data that's being used, that's being captured, is not going to wind up being detrimental. And it's going to take all of us together saying that, we want more safeguards, that we want more um, opportunities to make sure that the data is not going to be used in a negative or detrimental way. So I'll give you an example of one other thing that happened to me that I thought was really interesting. So I have a subscription to a magazine, and one day, originally the magazine would come and it had my name on it and the address was correct. So one day the magazine came, the name was wrong, and the address had been modified, not to the point of not recognizable, but so I got my subscription, but there had been changes. And so I only surmised that the magazine company had gone through a data conversion where they moved their data from one system to another. Now, I've been through situations like that. And when they do the conversion, you have corrupt data. You sometimes have corrupt data where things get changed. And I thought that, so I just called them up, make sure they correct the data, and move on. Then I got an email message from or not an email, but I got a letter from another company that was not related to this company. It wasn't a subsidiary. It wasn't a joint venture, or they weren't particularly supporting that company as far as I can tell. And it had the errors in it that I had corrected from the previous company. So somehow they're sharing that data. They shared the name and address information. And so we know that they're selling information. We know that companies. So probably what has happened is the magazine company sold their list of individuals who lived in my area to a company that was in my area, and they sent them corrupted data. But the fact that they sent it says, okay, so I didn't, by signing up for that magazine, basically I signed up for solicitation by anybody that wanted to buy that data. And I don't like having too many solicitations, because I don't feel like having to go through mail that I didn't want. If I didn't ask for it, if I didn't look for it, or if you didn't, there are plenty of advertising sources to where I can see your advertisement and decide to order your product or inquire about your product. So I was personally impacted, or firsthand impacted, by some of the data practices that we're experiencing now. And I feel that we don't take that data seriously. Who has it, what they're doing with it, how it's being used, which ways, or its curation ethical, or the practices ethical. Just because you have a product that you want to sell doesn't mean you get to drop an envelope on my desk or my mailbox. So there are plenty of articles out there about how to protect your data. But what I fear is that there isn't much that you can do to stop the train that has been running. And I think we need to take a different look at it as a society and how we choose to move forward. Not in a haphazard way, but in a more thoughtful. And there are a lot of things about what's going on because a lot of it I don't have access to. I don't have an access to how my magazine company handles my information, what they do with it. I don't know if they are tied to another system that gives them other information about me, and they decide that how to send me other magazines or whether to even send me a particular magazine. I don't know if they make 2 copies of the magazine, one that they've learned that I'm going to appreciate, that's going to reinforce my worldview, versus sending me something that allows me to discover new and different ideas. So my concern is that my concern is that we at least approach how data is handled. I know the conversation is attempted to be had. There was a recent article about a bill that was passed recently that gave ISPs more of an opportunity to sell your data without your permission and make money off of it. And this was passed by our legislators. I don't know how many people know about that, but I'll try to make sure I put it into the comments. So hopefully, at least we'll start the make sure that the conversation continues on, and that the next time you hear something about your data rights, that in some way becomes more important to you. Again, I just think at this particular time, it's the wild, wild west of data, and hopefully we will get to a more controlled environment where not only a few people have access to all of your data, but that you somehow can determine for yourself who knows you and who knows what about you. I'm going to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I'm going to wrap up this week. I look forward to being back with you next time.
That concludes this episode, and thank you for listening. This podcast is designed for live listener interaction. Visit the website, thelionsdenstl.wixsite.com/home for details about how to join the conversation. The video version of Altitude Adjustment is available on YouTube. Search for Lions Den STL. And the audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Anchor.fm, the iTunes Store, and the Google Play Music Store, to name a few. Look for Altitude Adjustment where you get your podcast, and consider making a contribution by visiting Anchor.fm/altitude-adjustment2. Remember, the internet is powered by your likes, shares, and comments. So please like, share, and comment on this and other episodes, because it matters. As always, be cool, be calm, and above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.